demonstrating measurable customer value is really the engine that starts to grow some of these metrics that end up being the things that people want to talk about at the strategic table: customer retention, net revenue retention, expansion revenue.
Welcome to the Midgame Mindset. Join us as we dive into the pivotal moments that shape today's top sales and marketing leaders, RevOps innovators, and entrepreneurs. This is where grit meets growth and the game changes for good. If you find value in this conversation, be sure to share it with another growth leader who would enjoy it. And now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Midgame Mindset. It's great to have you here. I'm your host, Rich Bishop, and with us today we have Samantha, Sam McAllister. Sam, thanks for joining.
Absolutely.
Great to have you. Now, Sam is currently the Chief Customer Officer at Carrot Legal. She has 2 successful PE exits under her belt already at this point in her career, and she currently serves on the board of the Fee League, which is an organization in Tampa that helps women to create their own personal board of directors to help them in their careers. Sam, would you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. So thank you first and foremost for having me. Thrilled to be here. And as you said, Samantha McAllister. Most people just call me Sam. I was born and raised on the west coast of Florida, just outside of Tampa. And fun fact, I have lived in the same 3-mile radius my entire life. Married 18 years in July. And while we have no children of our own, I am a very proud aunt to 10 nephews. Yes, all boys. Professionally, my path started in healthcare. I had a deep interest in hands-on care and was fortunate enough to spend time as a full-time caregiver for a medically complex patient, and really just served as his advocate through a whirlwind of specialist and hospital stays. And while incredibly meaningful, it ended abruptly after just 9 months due to a pulmonary embolism. And that loss made it very clear to me that direct patient care would change me in ways that I just wasn't willing to accept. And so I pivoted. I went to grad school and got my master's in healthcare administration, and that led me into the world of health tech. I was really fortunate to grow alongside that company, advancing through multiple roles. So over time, found myself really drawn to what I now see, or what I would call my North Star, and that's creating customer value, and really understanding the growth that enables a company to take advantage of. So, take care of your people, take care of your customers. Very logical business strategy, but also really a personal mantra.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, there's a lot there that we're going to dive into as we go. And customer-led growth is a big trend, I guess, that's coming around, or a buzzword that a lot of people are coming to now. But Sam, you've been there right from the very beginning on that front. So I'm looking forward to diving into some more of that and some of the philosophies around your North Star. Before we do, I'd love to talk about what we call the mid-game moment for you. And when we talk about the mid-game moment, we found that growth leaders of all shapes and sizes end up with this moment in their career where they're faced with a challenge with their business. They end up drawing on personal experiences, experiences from mentors, from books that they've read, to change their mindset. And that ends up creating the change in trajectory that they were looking for in their careers or with their business. So as I describe that, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I love this question. So when I really think about it, I've had a very traditional career path in some ways. I've spent a decade climbing the ladder with a single company, but I will say my growth was definitely accelerated compared to most. So started an entry-level role, SaaS healthcare technology company, about $12 million in revenue at the time, less than 100 employees. And over the years, I had the opportunity, like I said, to grow alongside that company. By the time I left, the company had grown to 150 million in revenue, and it had just partnered with a new PE sponsor and still growing rapidly. And when I think about my mid-game moment, I would say it came during those middle years when I felt like the growth wasn't coming fast enough for my own personal career. I knew early on that I wanted to be in senior leadership, and with each promotion, I was learning more, but I also found myself getting very restless. And I remember this moment so clearly. I was a director at the time, and our headquarters had just moved a few miles down the road. I was at Home Goods, clearly, to do some decorating and came across this fake plant in a pot that had a quote on it that said, "Grow where you're planted." And I don't know why, but it just stopped me in my tracks. And I was feeling stuck and I wanted the scope of responsibility of a VP role, felt ready for the next step. But that message really just reminded me that I didn't have to wait for a title or a specific promotion to start showing up as the leader I wanted to be. And that was really a turning point. I shifted my focus from just climbing the ladder to helping others grow alongside me. And so I co-founded a Women in Tech employee resource group and served as co-chair for 3 years, just helping women navigate some additional challenges of working in male-dominated industries. I also started thinking more deeply about just leadership itself. I had managers reporting to me at that point and realized that if I couldn't help them grow into great leaders, I wasn't doing my job. And so dove into every leadership book I could get my hands on. You name it, Patrick Lencioni, Brene Brown, Sheryl Sandberg, all the greats. And the interesting part is when I started focusing less on achievement and specific promotions and more on just leadership and lasting impact, it's really when growth and opportunity just kind of naturally followed.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a number of conversations with folks over the years who they're feeling stuck in their career and they're wondering why aren't I getting that promotion? Why aren't I? And it's like the cart is almost before the horse with that one, right? You almost have to show that you can do it and take on the responsibilities of those roles for people to be able to see, hey, you know what, you really are a VP, a director, whatever, as your career grows along. And it sounds like you really took that to heart. And grow where you're planted is an interesting one to kind of catch your eye. I know in some of the conversations that I've had with other growth leaders that for them, moving around to different cities or maybe becoming an expat and going to another country in order to take advantage of some of the opportunities is important to them. But you really, from an early age, embodied that grow where you're planted. How did that come to be in living within a 3 mile radius your whole life?
Yeah, I definitely have some roots here that I will say really kind of shaped my leadership style and the way that I think and deal with growth or enable growth in myself. So my leadership style was absolutely shaped, I would say, by my mom. She recently retired, but she spent her entire career as a banking center vice president at Bank of America. And I grew up watching her take on some of the most challenging teams and underperforming branches and transform them into top performers. And the biggest lesson she taught me, and one I carry with me really every day, is take care of your people. Get to know them. They're human beings first. They deserve a leader who sees them as such and someone who, knows their kids' names, their spouse's names, their dog's name, whatever matters to them. It's your responsibility as a leader to understand what motivates them, what they're striving for, and really how you fit into the bigger picture of their lives. And then the other lesson I would say is, and what has really kind of shaped my leadership style is accountability. Put simply, my mom had a zero tolerance policy for laziness or dishonesty. And, yet she managed to build some of the most high performing teams at Bank of America and was recognized time and again for it. And I didn't fully realize it until a few years ago, but those early lessons from watching her in action really just shaped the way that I lead today. It's about empathy, connection, but also high standards. People thrive when they know you care and you believe that they're capable of greatness.
That's right. Yeah, I love it. And having a front row seat to your mom's career, I'm sure is serving you well and really helping you as you're now right in the thick of your career and some of the bigger challenges that you're going to face in your career path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As you think about those times, you talked about the hard work, some of the work ethic that was there, but also some of the empathy with the people that are working on your team. Those are some great values that are still, it sounds like, serving you very well today. Are there some core values or principles that you held when you were younger that served you well then, that maybe as you've grown in your career, you've made some updates or aren't serving you as well now?
So, two core values that have really just evolved for me over time are stability and achievement. As I've grown, I've really shifted that into resilience and progress. When you're younger, or rather when I was younger, you crave stability, safety, comfort, structure. And in the formative years, that environment really gave me a strong foundation to learn and grow and build confidence. I was also a super high achiever, whether it was the best grades or being captain of the team or, I just wanted to be the best. And that drive really fueled me, that achievement fueled me. Um, but as I've grown personally and professionally, I've realized how little stability actually exists in this world, especially in the tech space. The only constant is change, and in fast-paced, ever-evolving environments, what really matters is your ability to adapt. The old saying, failed fast, pivot quickly, hold your ideas loosely. What got you here won't get you there. That kind of resilience has become just a new foundation for me and really a core value. And the same shift rather happened with achievement. If I had held on tightly to achievement as a core value, I absolutely would have burned out. In leadership, you really rarely get the satisfaction of just checking things off a list every day. The more responsibility you have, the longer the timelines, the slower the wins. And I had to learn to celebrate progress, find meaning in small wins and forward motion, even when the finish line is still far off. And that shift really has helped me kind of stay grounded and motivated over time.
Yeah, and so you talked about the influence that your mom had on some of the core values that you've had. I know that mentoring others is an important aspect to you. Was there somebody that helped you with that progress over perfection type of attitude and mindset?
It's interesting. One of the most meaningful challenges I've experienced came from a mentor, former boss, dear friend. His name is Greg Hawes. He was really the catalyst behind that major shift in how I view success. I've mentioned before that achievement, really was a core personal value for a long time. And I was classic high achiever, motivated by goals, checklist, all the things. Um, but again, as you grow in your career, work starts to look different, and typically those timelines start to get longer and longer before you have that sense of accomplishment. And Greg really challenged me to adopt progress over perfection. And it just really reframed how I measure success. It gave me permission, if you will, to let go of that need to have everything perfectly packaged or complete, and instead focus on just forward momentum and celebrating incremental progress and learning along the way. And I will say, Rich, with managing leaders, growing leaders, so whether it be managers or directors or those getting into a VP role, helping them to adopt that as well, because oftentimes people who are growing quickly in their careers or are those superstars that you really want to invest time into, they also are typically high achievers, and it can be so demotivating if that is your mindset and how you're measuring your own success. It just becomes very frustrating and again demotivating. So I've had the pleasure of reframing that for myself, but also helping others reframe it for themselves, and that's been rewarding.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's so important to have the mentors in your life to help you see around the corners because they've been through it. They've been through some of those experiences, and it can be frustrating and it can block progress if you're waiting for perfection before you act or before you publish something, right? Whatever it happens to be, go after that prospect. You wait until you have everything together. If you do that, you're only going to not only delay the progress, but you're not going to end up getting to the places that you want to get to. It's that imperfection of just taking one step in front of the other and making sure that you're moving forward along the way that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Action bias.
Definitely. One of the interesting parts of your career that I would love to go back to is as you're working through and you're climbing, you're in this high pressure private equity environment that can be unforgiving at times, but if that's your DNA and you're high achieving, it really is a good spot for you. Through the two exits, I'd love to first focus on the first one that you've been through. What was that process like, and what did you learn in that you weren't expecting to learn going in?
Yeah, really great question. You are right. The private equity world it can be very, very intense. You know, I would say going through a successful exit is probably the closest thing in business to like winning a national championship. Not that I have done that, but if you're a sports fan, it's the best way I can describe it. It just takes an incredible amount of work to position your business for growth, keep it healthy, and ultimately make it attractive to potential buyers. So when all those pieces come together, it's sort of magical. For example, a 3x multiple on a secondary buyout, it's just a huge milestone. So rewarding on a lot of levels, not just financially, but because of what it takes to get there. I've been fortunate to be on both sides of the diligence process. And so conducting diligence on acquisition targets and also being the one under the microscope when prospective buyers are assessing us. And diligence can be intense to say the least. It is time consuming, it's detailed. It can honestly also be a major distraction from running the day-to-day business if you're not careful. But it's also where I learned the most. So one of the big things that stood out to me was how different private equity sponsors approach the investment. EBITDA obviously is a consistent focus, but the investment thesis, what they're betting on, it can vary wildly and even shift during the hold period based on broader market conditions. And so one thing I wish I knew earlier is just how much the type of exit can influence strategy and execution. There's a difference between a sponsor to sponsor sale versus a strategic sale versus an IPO. Each has different expectations, timelines, operating dynamics, and similarly, the private equity firms themselves can vary very much. Some are incredibly hands-on and operate almost like an extension of your leadership team, while others are more high level, preferring kind of a regular cadence of reporting and performance metrics. But honestly, the best part of the experience was, being part of a high growth story, figuring out the formula, watching the year over year growth numbers and knowing that the business was becoming increasingly attractive. I also saw firsthand how important it is to have a strong leader who can tell the story to prospective buyers in, a very compelling and confident way. I didn't realize how critical that narrative and storytelling piece was until I was in it. So, at the end of the day, really wild ride. It takes a ton of grit and collaboration and focus. But being part of it and contributing to it and then seeing it pay off, it's really an experience that I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, definitely. And the customer aspect of it, retention, right? The cross sells and upsells, all of those end up kind of going into it. And that was definitely your area of expertise in those situations. Was there something from the first exit that you took with you and you're glad that you had that particular experience or situation happen in the first go round that really aided you in your approach the second time around?
Yeah, so not to be cliche, but the phrase "what got you here won't get you there." I feel like it can be, for lack of better words, frustrating when someone goes into a new period of growth in a business and you look around and you say, "Oh my gosh, things are just not nowhere near perfect. They're not where they need to be to get us where we need to go." but I look at that quite differently now. Even where I'm at right now, you know, um, the foundation that you need to support the next layer of growth is going to look different from what it looked like 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. And so the progress that gets made, or even the decisions that get made to support the foundation that existed for that layer of growth aren't going to be good enough for the next layer of growth. And I feel like having grace and some curiosity and some humility around being a leader in those moments. And what I'm getting at is, when you are a leader in a next phase of growth, it can be very tempting to look back and say, how could we have ended up here? Who made this decision to implement the CRM or to implement this, that, or the other thing?
Right.
Um, and it's
And the sins
important
of the
to,
past are 10 to 15 years old at that point, right? This group of people is a completely different group than the ones that had been there
that's right.
previously that made those decisions, right?
That's right. So I mean that was something watching the way that the company changed so dramatically from when I initially started to the first exit and then the first to the second. I mean just the work that you have to do on your foundation to sustain and scale and be ready for the growth that's coming. It's pretty incredible. And so again, remaining humble and curious about why things are the way that they are and not making assumptions. And then just diving in and figuring out what you need to do to get yourself ready for the next level.
Now, I'd love to dig into your opinions on this because there are obviously different types of CEOs, chief revenue officers, COOs, right? This executive level that takes part in these conversations with the PE firms or potential buyers. They're helping to develop the thesis potentially, right, on the exit, on the sale for what could be next for the company. That has to be an attractive part of what brings a new buyer in. From a client success point of view, there are a lot of companies that have taken that client success aspect and really just kind of focused on the clients that were there and either how to grow those clients or just really trying to understand how diverse is that customer base. But I'd love to get your opinion of as a customer success leader, what is their seat at the table and what is their responsibility in helping to drive that strategy for 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned towards the beginning that this focus on customer value is almost becoming a little bit of a new buzzword, which I find very interesting because it's so dang logical, like take care of your customers, and that customer value is really the engine. Enterprise value is the output. And so if you build systems that consistently deliver measurable value to customers, especially in a recurring revenue model, you kind of unlock these levers that PE firms care about the most: growth, retention, efficiency, predictability. And so when I think about like having a seat at the table with strategic decisions, knowing that, and you're working toward an exit, again, demonstrating measurable customer value is really the engine that starts to grow some of these metrics that end up being the things that people want to talk about at the strategic table: customer retention, net revenue retention, expansion revenue, reducing your churn. Something else that I think is so incredibly important, particularly in the markets that I've been in, is how your reputation in the market drives your ability to sell new business, right? Making sure that you have referenceable customers, having a referenceable customer sell for you is by far the best way to go. And so making sure that, again, you are actively driving customer value that is measurable for the consumer. They can see the ROI in the product or service that you're giving to them. It just helps to, again, it's that engine that drives that output that everybody wants of enterprise value.
Yeah, that recurring model is so important to keep that churn very, very low. I've also been a fan. I know that churn is the term that's used in the market. I don't like that at all because it paints the customer as somebody that, yeah, they're going to churn over. They're going to leave us. That's not at all the case when we're talking about customer value and driving customer value the way that you're talking about.
It's a complete lagging indicator. You know, if you're looking at churn to monitor your customer base, you're going to be too late. And so something that I've done a few times now is put together objective health scores that actually tell you how the customer's doing real time, and have monitoring tools that allow you to see when certain components of the health score are changing, so that you can proactively engage the customer to understand what might be driving that change.
So I'd love to get your experience of, have you had a customer that maybe was negative or had a low customer score, a low NPS, whatever version it was that's being used, that you've helped to turn around into becoming an advocate, and what was that process like?
So, and these are some of my favorite stories, and I've been lucky enough to have several of them. So, I feel like if I can think about the themes in those situations, in the software that I have been, or software companies that I've been part of, we're providing full practice management solutions, and so these are core software. Software that the customer is using to run their entire business. This isn't a supplement to their business. It helps them run the entire thing. And so when something isn't working and they are upset or no longer feel like they want to put their name on the line for your business, it is typically something that's very core to how they operate, core to driving their own growth, or maintaining the relationship with their clients, that we are threatening somehow. And so there's a problem that we are no longer addressing in a reasonable way. And so understanding the root cause, the low NPS score, the bad customer sat rating is really just a symptom. Understanding what's driving that underneath, and understanding, what is that person in that practice or that firm being asked to do that we are making their day job harder. How do I understand what that is, and how can I fix that? Whether it be, I feel like a great example that has been transcendent no matter what industry is reporting. So, at the end of the day, we all have a boss, and we all have to provide, metrics that we can show whether we're being successful or not. And if we're not being successful, what is driving that? And what am I doing to fix it? And if you can't get your hands on the right data, that can be incredibly frustrating for someone who's in charge, who's trying to understand what is happening in their business, and how can I make sure that we are doing the right things to get us out of that, that negative cycle. And so being able to understand what those needs are, and either connect them with maybe a third party consultant that can spend the time to do a deep dive on where their needs are. BI tools are so popular, but they do take a bit of a data scientist type background to really be able to get what you want out of them. Sometimes it's not quite as easy as being able to read a data dictionary and figuring out how those pieces come together. And so I've had several that have been in that category where it's just frustration with not being able to get the data out of their system. But ultimately, it's a core need of, listen, I've got a boss too, and I need to be able to show in very discrete ways how we're performing. And so being able to solve that problem for people, whether it's a creative option, or going outside with pulling in maybe a third party consultant, or just finding maybe there's certain data fields that don't exist in the BI tool that need to exist. And so taking that and advocating with the product team, to get those things in there so that the customers can ultimately thrive, has really been successful.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes in that process, you need to look at the inputs, right? Because if you're putting terrible data in, you're going to get terrible reporting out. So sometimes in that exercise, of course, you end up with, well, all right, we need to change some of our processes or change the system to make sure we're capturing the information that we need to report. And that can take a little bit of time to build and implement all the way through to reporting so that you can get the data that you need. Yeah. So you made a jump. You talked about early in your career, really starting off with personal health care and how important that was to you with the patient that you were working very closely with. You then stayed in healthcare for an EMR practice management firm. And now you've completely flipped the script and you're over on the legal side of things. Tell me a little bit about that jump.
Yeah, so making the big bold move, if you will, to leave healthcare, which has been my entire career, my education, everything, um, and also making a decision to leave an organization that I'd been with for over a decade and step away from that space entirely. It was very much a hard call. There was, a strong comfort factor. I was the expert in the room. That's a very safe space to operate in. But beyond that, my entire career, again, my education, everything was rooted in healthcare. And so I truly loved also being able to support people who were supporting patients. That sense of impact was really incredibly meaningful to me. But I also knew that it was time for a change. So, taking that leap into the legal technology space, something that I have discovered is that between legal professionals and healthcare professionals, they are both taking care of people in a very vulnerable moment in their lives. And so the meaning and the impact feels very similar to me. There's obviously some nuances between what the needs are between those two industries, but at the core of it, that is how I was able to really connect with the impact behind it. That's something that's very important to me. And I can really see the impact that I am making with my team, with our customers. And it really has just affirmed that decision in a big way. Change is not easy. Stepping into the unknown really never is. But it's also incredibly rewarding. And I'm really proud of that move and grateful for the opportunity to grow into a whole new space.
Yeah, I love it. And you can take those experiences that you've had and growing those teams, really focusing on mentoring those in the group, helping them to grow in their careers. It sounds like you've got a great team there at Carrot with you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're awesome.
I love it. So what's next for you? And as you look out now, Carrot is private equity owned. So obviously that experience it works well for you. You're familiar with that kind of environment. What are some of the challenges that you're helping to overcome now?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, I'm the chief customer officer at Carrot Legal, and that means that I am over the majority of the customer facing teams post sale. So think implementation, project management, client success, product support. And the legal practice management and accounting platform that we are delivering to the space is designed to really drive operational efficiency for law firms. So at its core, our solution, helps every role in the firm thrive. The aim is to reduce manual work, capture billable time that might otherwise be lost, accelerate cash flow. And it's all about empowering our users to focus on what matters most instead of getting bogged down into those admin tasks. And so in my role, success really hinges on two things. First, capturing the voice of the customer through various channels and making sure that that perspective is front and center when strategic decisions get made. It's critical that our roadmap and priorities align with the real needs and expectations of our customer base. And the second major piece of my role is leading all of those post-sale customer-facing teams. I see it as both a privilege and a serious responsibility to be in a leadership position, and I am acutely aware of the ripple effect that I have and on my team's experience, their day to day, the conversations they have at the dinner table. And so I lead with curiosity, always asking, what problems are we solving for our customers? What challenges are my own teams facing? And are the solutions actually delivering value? And so that alignment between strategy and customer needs and team experience is really what success looks like for me at this point.
I love it. I love it. That's great. There's so much going on in the post sales world of taking care of the customer between support, implementation, client success, continuing to support them and be plugged in with them as they go, having that connection with product. Given all of the recent focus in that area, now client success is really growing as a profession with a lot of nuance really kind of coming into play. You've got some AI tools that are now coming into focus in some of these areas to help. So whether it be those tools or whether it be some of the other trends, what are maybe one or two of the major opportunities that you see out there for many companies in this post-sales client success world?
Yeah, obviously AI is everywhere, and we're definitely looking at ways to utilize it in a way that's really going to again drive customer value. I think there's actually two ways recently that we've been exploring. One is internal, the other is external. So I feel like anyone who's ever had to take feature requests from customers is going to appreciate this. There's always feature requests out there, whether they come from internal customers or external customers, and trying to maintain them in a way where you're managing duplicates or you're weighing them real time against what other priorities might be on your roadmap. Having an AI engine that can, one, help to route and make sure that duplicates are being identified, and you're getting those real time closing the loop. I think one of the most frustrating things as an end user myself is, providing feedback and then having that feedback feel like it's gone into a black hole. And oftentimes that is because the feedback mechanism is not being supported in a smart way. And that's where I think AI could really be leveraged. And so we're exploring that. And then externally, I mean, there are certainly, a previous leader of mine has said the best support is no support. And it is so true. I mean, think about, again, as an end user yourself, the last thing you want to do is pick up the phone and have to call any sort of support line ever. And so looking at opportunities through the analytics in the system, where are users getting hung up? Where are the clicks taking 5 times more than they should? And trying to proactively figure out what is happening on certain pages. And then also when the calls are still coming in, understanding what are the calls about, and providing proactive educational material to try and mitigate additional calls on similar topics is something that we're definitely going to be. The chatbots. Chatbots have been out there a while, and chatbots are only as good as the educational material that you feed them. And so I've seen some do really well. I've seen some not do so well. But really the concept is, again, if you think about this from the customer seat, trying to deflect their reason for even having to pick up the phone is what we're ultimately trying to drive towards. And I think that AI will absolutely be central to that.
I love it. Love it. Yeah, the AI is such a buzzword, but I think we're squarely right now as we're recording this, we're at a time where a lot of leaders out there have said, okay, this is the Jerry Maguire moment, right? We've got past a lot of the hype, but show me the money. I want to see where this is really going to make a difference with our business. So I love the approach there that you have with that. As we look to wrap up, Sam, I'd love to hear from you. You've talked a little bit earlier about the importance of your nephews and how proud you are of them. Is there any one lesson from your career that you wish that you could impart on them as they get ready to continue growing and move on in their career?
Yeah, I love this question. And it is so hard to narrow it down to just one piece of advice. What first comes to mind is staying curious. I feel like I've mentioned that word a few times today, but be curious about people, about processes, about your own routines, kind of leave your self-righteousness at the door and adopt a always learning mindset. Um, However, a lesson that's been kind of most pivotal to me most recently is find your community and build a personal board of directors. I wasn't even aware of this phrase or this concept until a few years ago. And, life, especially in leadership, can be incredibly isolating. When you're navigating difficult decisions or a new set of circumstances that feels overwhelming, it's really easy to feel like you're the only one walking that path. And, the higher up you go, the fewer people you feel like you can talk to about the tough stuff, especially when it's sensitive. And so that loneliness can really kind of sap the joy. It can cloud your perspective, dull your creativity. And so that's why, in addition to my role at Carrot, you mentioned I serve on the board of directors for Fee League. It is a women's leadership community based in Tampa, and it's really a space where women can connect with like-minded professionals, share openly, and essentially create that personal board of directors. And that kind of support system has been just invaluable to me. It wasn't something I even knew I needed. It's where I go to be challenged, to be encouraged, and ultimately reminded that I'm not alone. And I really encourage everyone to find that type of engagement with just like-minded individuals. It's been really game changing.
Yeah, and Sam, I can really attest to the value of that community as well. It's been a big thing for me, especially over the last 2 to 3 years as I've gotten started with my consulting agency and with a number of other projects going on, that having that community of like-minded people is so critically important. And one thing that a lot of high achievers, I think, sometimes struggle with is the vulnerability to reach out and say, hey, I could use some help, or I could use some advice here. And making the time that it takes to actually do that and to plug in, because we're so busy, we have so many things going on, but it is so worth the time to take to go to some of these events, to go and join some of these groups and be an active member and participant, that it ends up paying off in the long run.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Great. So, Sam, if people are looking to get in touch with you or follow more about what you're doing or some of the organizations you're involved in, how do they do that?
Yeah, I am very active on LinkedIn, so happy to share my LinkedIn information. And then you can also find us at the Fee League website. So again, I serve on the board there, and we're always looking for new members. You don't have to be Tampa based, but that's another area that I'm very active. So.
Love it. Great, Sam. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate all of your insight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Midgame Mindset. If today's episode sparked a new idea or helped shift your perspective, share it with someone who's ready to grow. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep playing the game. With the right mindset, the best moves are still ahead. Until next time, keep changing the game.